Hey guys, this is Frank with another episode of Modern Church Leader, joined with my new buddy, Jay Kranda, all the way from, we're close to each other. I'm in San Diego. You're in...
I'm in Orange County, yeah. So
Orange County, okay. So all the way from Orange County at Saddleback Church. Jay was the very first online campus pastor on the planet. So he has a wealth of knowledge.
I don't know about that, but I'm pretty close. We're
going to just go with it. Yeah. The title of the interview is going to be like, Jay Kranda first.
You're going to get a lot of replies from friends that are going to be like, Jay, that's not true. We know that's not true.
I can't wait.
That's good. That's good. I like it.
Yeah. We need clickbait around here. You know what I'm saying? We need more of it. We're going to put that. Tell the audience a little bit about you. Like, how did you go back a little bit? Like, how did you get into the church and ministry, and obviously doing it full time? It sounds like you've been doing the online campus pastor for 12, 13 years at Saddleback. But I'm sure the story starts before that. So tell us a little bit.
Yeah, I got accepted. I accepted Jesus when I was in high school, kind of grew up around faith, and wanted to be
in Michigan.
No. Here in Southern California.
Oh, so in SoCal. Okay.
I'm cool. SoCal all the way. My parents met at and this is right now, obviously Jesus Revolution is very popular, but my parents met at a Calvary Chapel in Costa Mesa. Okay.
Yeah. Very cool.
Which is obviously shaped a lot of Southern California culture, at least the Christian church culture. But essentially wanted to be a youth pastor. My parents kind of fell away from the faith, and I started to get engaged in church around that time, and essentially wanted to be a youth pastor. And I had read, my pastor at the time kind of gave me a couple books from a couple pastors from Saddleback Church. I didn't know who Rick Warren was. I actually knew Doug Fields, which is one of our youth pastors forever, and kind of an OG youth pastor guy. Many people know Doug, and I had an opportunity. I was at a small church in Bellflower, California, which is on the fringes of LA County, and essentially was my senior pastor at the time said, "Hey Jay, you're going to graduate, in a year." And I was at Biola University at the time, undergrad, and he said, "If you want a job, you probably need to leave this church." I know many people do that when you're at a small church. Right. And one of my mentors happened to be at Saddleback Church, and pretty much was working for Doug Fields, and said, "Hey, you want to come intern with me?" And I was like, that would be a blast. So I went from a small pond to a big pond, and I just learned a lot through that last year of college at Saddleback, and started actually on their communications team as kind of a people person over some of their ministries. And I had more people in our photography ministry than was at my previous church. And, my mind, people here, I was just so blown away. Like, how are there 400 photographers in this list? I don't even understand. And
that's bigger than most churches out there, right?
It's totally, but our youth ministry, we hit 80 or 90 students in our high school ministry. And it was that was the most people I thought could ever come to one thing. You know what I mean? I just was blown away. And so then in a course of kind of opportunity, I had an opportunity to get a job there. And then they had this thing called the Internet Campus in 2009, 2010. It was just, they were streaming their church service. And I just got really motivated by and kind of excited about the idea that they had hundreds of people watching every week in 2010, and nobody was doing anything. And because I had come from a smaller church, I was like, that's a lot of people. They're just watching this thing. And internet streaming, all this, it was pretty new around that time. And I remember in college, I would watch, this is actually kind of cool. This is not a brag, at all. But it was just kind of how God linked the stories. I remember being in college, and I had a Toshiba computer laptop thing, whatever. And I remember I would, every Saturday night, every Wednesday night, I would watch Louis Gigelow's church had a streaming event that they would stream on. It was Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday night. It was called 722 or something. Do you remember this at all?
I don't know. I have not heard of this one.
It was like, so they would stream their college night or something. And I remember being in like 2007, 2008. And I was like, it was the first church streaming related thing. I was like, this is so cool. I'm watching this thing in like Atlanta, but I'm in Southern California. And it was just like, I felt part of it. And it was like early versions of this. And then it was cool. About a year ago, Louis spoke at our church and I got to like meet him and I got to share with him how I'm an online pastor because this was an early experience.
Right.
And it was just really cool. Like he was like, what? And it was like a really cool kind of moment.
Did he
like,
remember it? Did he remember like
that
whole...
He was like, oh yeah. Like, and it was this huge thing. It was a popular thing, but because like stuff didn't really go viral or whatever. I don't even know how probably through being at a Christian university, I found out about it. But yeah, he totally remembered it. He was really encouraged by it. But it was, so, and then, we just started to mess around with this internet thing. We got connected early on to Life Church because they had been messing around it for a while prior to that. And we just slowly started to invest more and more into our online community, whatever that was called, and just figure it out. And definitely since 2000, and then I got hired full time 2012 just to focus as the online pastor. And I definitely was one of the first. I don't know what number, but I was definitely one of the early full-time online pastors. Very first
one right here. The Life Church person was still part-time. So
Brandon.
Brandon, sure.
And Alan. I could name them all. My Dave Adamson's going to be very mad at me because he claims one of the early guys. So he's going to message me.
He was on the podcast, but he didn't say anything about being the first. So
I know he says somewhere where he's the 8th, and I always joke with him. I go, where in the world? There's no directory. Like, where did that number come from? Like, I want to know.
Do you guys have like a WhatsApp chat with just like the 10 first online campus pastors ever? You guys should. You should 100% just have like.
Well, what's weird, and there is an author that I'm trying to scan my bookshelf right now to get her name. Campbell. She's a writer. I think that's her. She's written a lot of early books about early Christian online community, and they go back to like the 80s, 90s, and like one of the first online churches was actually an online, like a message board for like people that were blind, and it provided like you go back early, like obviously, like, I mean, some of these chat groups, ARPANET days and some of the message boards were, I mean, it's very different now with the streaming and the online group kind of video stuff, but it goes back.
AOL, I'm sure there was some, there was like a bunch of
something going on Hotmail Messenger, and who knows?
Totally. Someone needs to do like the history of online church.
I know
that needs to be. Yeah. You know how there's these interactive, like online, like history things.
Yes.
I'm trying to think of an example, but like somebody needs to do one of those.
Yeah.
I think the very first online campus pastor should probably be the one to do it. It's my.
Hey, well, if I create the website, it's me. I become the first. So as long as I get the Google index, that's all that matters. Or maybe the Chat GDP index. Who knows what matters? Maybe Bing is more important now. I don't know.
I mean, careful. You might be the last. Chat GDP is going to have like some AI generated person it's over.
Yes, 100% possible.
Oh, it's crazy, man. So basically, I'll just for sake of easy numbers, 10 years at this, being full time, and having seen it transform. And like, I'm sure COVID was this kind of crazy thing, but give me your perspective. How has it changed over 10 years?
Yeah, I mean, it obviously has followed a lot of the trend lines of like how the internet has evolved from like text to interactive to all encompassing kind of at a high level. And, as the internet became more social, it feels like the church became more accepting of it being valid. And so, the Facebooks and the MySpaces and all those types of things really changed, the Web 2.0 type of expression, allowed it to feel more, I would just say, natural. And whatever is happening now and versus what's going to happen in the future, it really, I've seen the change from it being primarily, I would always say the church has always very much quickly embraced technology when it dispenses information. So if you kind of look at, Romans roads, books, radio, TV, internet, that's real easy. I think where the church always struggled with is this like biblical, like ecclesia, koinonia type of church. Like, can you actually consider that? And as more social elements got introduced from, group experiences, through, a Facebook group, a WhatsApp group, or whatever tool you use. And then even like using a tool like Zoom made it more natural. And so it's this, early on, it was just a lot of like discipleship, evangelism happening through these tools. Then there was the boom with, the early 2000s with Church Online platform coming out of Life Church and a bunch of churches creating that tool. There was a boom of streaming your services. And then I would say during COVID and coming out of COVID, there was this huge acceptance around online groups being a valid kind of either expression of your church or an add-on, because people could, with a video connection, I could connect and I could know people. And so I think where I feel we're going now is this, like, how do you actually in a healthy way fully integrate? So like, don't just think about your streaming strategy, but how do you think about how is giving, LinkedIn, how is maybe some kind of training tools, how does your CRM interact? And there's this like real deep, like, don't see it as I don't like the expression digital first. I like the expression of like your strategy or your objective, and then digital kind of integrates. It's not the solution, it's a solution, and that integration. And so there's this, what I feel now is there was a little bit of I would say COVID was a little bit of a shotgun wedding with many churches around digital. And coming out of COVID, there's this, okay, what did we like? What did we not like? And many churches pulled way too far back because once they could meet. But I think now as we're settling, most churches, at least what I'm noticing is, hey, there were some good wins, and let's now revisit and let's like try to integrate. And the number one like hot thing right now, at least, is most churches are trying to figure out how to use digital for planting churches. That's definitely, I would say, one of the more hotter topics that I feel I notice. It's something we're trying to think about. But I think there's so much, I say a lot that like digital is like this multiverse conversation. You can go in so many different directions. And so it's like, I usually tell smaller churches, be super focused on what you're trying to do, because you can get lost real quick. There's reasons why like pioneers usually get eaten by the jungle. And I think you got to kind of like, don't get too far off. And so,
I mean, it's interesting times. Yeah. COVID seemed to like, it literally just forced every church on the planet to go figure out some version of online church, whatever, however you want to call it, right? Whether it's just doing a service online or figuring out groups or doing both or doing daily devotionals or like just all these pieces, right? To your point, it's like the multiverse. There's all kinds of stuff that you could do. But it forced everyone to go do it. Then everyone got back, and it's harder on the small church with less resources.
Yes.
Like doing church on Sunday is hard enough in some sense, right? Or enough work. And you're trying to do this church online too. And it's like, how do you figure that out? So it'd be good to chat a little bit about that. But before we get into that, like, okay, you're at a big church online, like how many people are watching church online in a weekend or during the week? I'm sure you guys have multiple services. Like, how many folks are you guys interacting with? And then what does, a day in the life of Jay look like as an online campus pastor?
Yeah. So we measure, and this is something that I think many people have wrestled through already, but we look very strategically at how many people watch at least 30 minutes of our service. And so like, we don't measure views or impressions, but we look at, from our website to our TV apps to YouTube, Facebook, we look at how many people watch 30 minutes in a given week. And we saw a huge transition pre-COVID, even where people were moving away from just watching live. They were watching on their own time. And so we kind of moved towards this just in that week. And so we have around, I would say on average, like 18 1,000 people that watch in a given week our service, at least 30 minutes. And then we have about 800 small groups affiliated with our online community. So people, most of my team actually is, lack of a better word, they're small group pastors with other responsibilities, but we just like focus on those groups. And then we have 40 extensions, which are members of our community that host church either in their home or rent space. And so, you know, I say this very deliberately that as the online community pastor, we very much see the online community as this collective of everybody who watches online. As you move deeper into our assimilation discipleship process, if you're local, we plug you into one of our campuses in Southern California or around the world, or we help you get into a group or start an extension. And we definitely do that. So like top of the funnel, it represents everybody. And then as you move deeper in, that's where we get you plugged into something or even another church. But if there's nothing, we're trying to link more. How do we start more microsite type of locations? We call them extensions at our church, but that's kind of the like scope.
House churches, or
essentially,
like that kind of concept, but connected to you guys on Sunday and kind of all the other ways you guys do it. Yeah. Very cool. So, I mean, that's a big job. How big's the team? However you define team, I'm sure lots of people work on this stuff.
Yeah. So I would say our immediate online community team is like 3.5 people, like 3 people and a part-time person. But we have our church, because we're a big church, we have a central team that, I'm kind of, I don't have to, I don't have to like have these people reporting me. They do a lot of stuff. So I have a lot of support people that help me execute what we do. Our team primarily is focused on care. So, and then a lot of like, the marketing or the development or all that other stuff is they're working on larger goals for our church. So, but I definitely give them a lot of work. I will say, they all know my name. Either that's a good word or a bad word. I don't know.
Another email from Jay.
Our head
of web. Needy.
Our head of web is a good friend of mine, and I am like,
good. That's probably a good thing.
I'm like, I'm sorry, Ryan. I keep messaging you. I apologize. So,
are you on Slack, like Teams? Like what's the?
Yeah, we use Teams. Our whole org moved to Teams during COVID, and so I'm constantly Teamsing him. So it's I don't even know if that's the phrase. I actually don't know what the. I don't know
if there's a good one. Yeah,
I don't think there's a good one. Unfortunately, Slack is obviously Slack's the cool one. Teams is like, oh, you're boring IBM company or something.
So what, with the team and everything, like what's a day in the life look like? Like outside of Sunday, when I'm sure just like a lot of, church, pastoral staff and whatnot, like everybody's on, what's going on the rest of the week?
Yeah. A lot of what we do would be very similar. Like we're kind of structured in a very similar way to a campus where, we kind of do a lot of follow-up from the weekend to a lot of care type of issues and then just planning future events. So we have a lot of programs and things that kind of move people from our crowd into our community. And, we do something called, Discover Your Purpose, which formerly was class at our church, where we kind of renamed it, but we host those every month on Zoom, 2 hours. Our team all teaches those, and those move people. And really it's kind of, it's our catechism. It's our way that we kind of bring. So we teach that every month on Zoom. We have something called meetups where a couple times a month, we will host them or we'll encourage a member to host a meetup in a certain area. So like somebody might want to start an extension. Like we have one in the Orlando area, and we'll say, so Connie wants to start an extension. We'll say, hey, host a meetup, and we'll promote this. So it's a lot of programming about, moving people around. What's unique about our week generally is, we have this huge online expression. There's a lot of details, and we have to record things for that, make sure it works. But then we also still have the house church expressions. And so like my Friday is around, I have a WhatsApp group with all my extension leaders, and then I have an email, and I'm like, hey guys, this is what we're talking, and I'm prepping them to host their service in their home or in their rented space. And so we kind of get both, where we're in the in-person and then we're in the digital stuff. But what's weird about the digital stuff, our online service on the weekend is pretty easy because we've kind of pre-recorded. Usually it's just making sure it executes right. Like if hopefully the web, our streaming provider doesn't go down and there's not some technical, certification that didn't get updated in some random world I've always, and so, but it's usually, we do a lot of focus. It's all the simple rhythm. The only other thing is, we definitely are involved in a lot of digital, like high level conversations and just trying to move stuff forward. And so, but yeah, it's talking to people and moving them to their next step. And so it's not, it's not too different actually at the end of the day.
Right. And yeah, and doing all that in the online format, versus it all being in the physical format, and being able to support that.
The weird part is around care and some of our communication, we're interacting with people because we've been doing this for such a long time. We have people all around the world constantly, like I had a conversation this week with two group members that are, going through stuff and they're in online groups and they're going through a separation. And I'm like doing a WhatsApp call for an hour, talking somebody out of a divorce. And he's
you're doing real pastoral.
Yeah. We're doing all the real conflict, moving people being, I'm telling him, I'm like, dude, I'm kicking him in his rear. Do not rush to this. I'm doing all the stuff that if I was, if we're hanging out at, Butter Buzz Coffee in your neighborhood and we're having coffee, I'm just like, no, dude, you can't do this. You got to, your faith is serious and your marriage is serious. And so the weird thing is the time zone. So we'll do early morning, late night, type of stuff. And so that's the weird rhythm of our team is just, we're having to have a lot of random, when people maybe are used to not working, we're having to interact because we have a good, good 25% of our, I think on average, 20% of our online community is somewhere else in the world. And so it is, it's interesting because 50% of our extensions are out of the country. And so, which is really cool to see God work that way.
Yeah. That's huge. How often, or how do you think about or measure or, answer this however you want, but getting people from an online expression into one of maybe the main locations? I know you have the extensions and you have house churches and those kinds of things, which sounds like you kind of help manage all that. But getting them into one of the kind of main locations, is that a big focus? Do you guys really try to get people in the door there at the main campus?
Yeah,
if they're local, obviously.
Yeah, if they're local, we think a lot about this. Everybody has different feelings around this. I definitely, and our church definitely feels that, in-person community is definitely the prime or best expression of biblical community. I would always, we use the example a lot of marriage. Like my wife and I use digital all throughout the day to interact, stay in contact, joke around or whatever. But at the end of the day, we come home to each other for a reason. And even though that doesn't limit what God can do digitally to strengthen or keep us engaged if I'm traveling or whatever, but we believe that's true too with biblical community. And so for us, if there's something down the street, we want to get you plugged in there. So we do a couple things. We host our services online. We have a separate team. My team hosts those. We try to talk about things locally. We try to promote different campuses. So I'll have, because we're a multi-site church, I'll bring next Friday, we're pre-recording something for the weekend, and I have our Anaheim campus pastor hosting with me. And we're deliberately trying to, we have a campus in Argentina, and I'm working with them to record an intro so that we can promote that campus one weekend. So we try to promote it. We also, out of COVID, because we were really intentional on this around COVID, we had a call to action created just for those on the stream called Plan a Visit, where you could go and get connected to someone via text at a campus. And we promote that in our streams and on camera. Hey, we would love, if you live in Southern California, or if you're in Hong Kong or in, Santa Rosa in the Philippines, or plan your visit. And so we think a lot about it. And then there's just the personal follow-up. If we find out somebody, all of our team, if you have the option, we will very quickly engage you and help you get plugged in. This week I had somebody, reach out that they wanted to go to a certain campus, and I connected them to that campus pastor and, in email. And so we're very deliberate. I think there are things you can do to control that. And then there are things you can't. One of the reasons why we promote different campuses on stream and want different people to host with us is because we want them to see the value of that. We don't want to keep people just online, but it can be hard when people hide their info, and that's the tricky part. So
yeah. I love your example of like, it's like marriage, and same thing, right? We're communicating all day long. We're talking about the kids. We're figuring out dinner. We're coordinating schedules, but it's like, there's nothing like being at home as a fam, right? Like you can't beat it. That's a great way to think about it. I want to jump to small churches, but real quick, like how much 10 years ago did you get a lot more pushback, or a lot more like, this isn't church, right? This is not, versus today, do you feel like everybody's like, yeah, it's fine, it's church? Like,
yeah.
How's that evolved?
That's an interesting question. I mean, for sure, there was a ton of pushback early on. There was a lot of feelings around, even at my own church, that it might hurt our attendance. It would, it's promoting the wrong thing, because there is something to, there is something to the truth that what you promote or what you offer, there can be pros, but you got to deal with the cons. Like you can't reap the benefits. And then, like the example that I think about a lot, like policing, like free speech on the internet is really difficult. And like when Mark Zuckerberg in the past has complained that that's hard, I go, yeah, it is hard when you think about billions of seconds of messages. It's really hard to actually do it. And the algorithm's going to get it wrong.
Right.
But at the end of the day, like he can't complain and then also get all the money from it. Like that's part of it. You're collecting the check. So it is your problem. And so I think with streaming, by enabling something, I've thought long and hard about the ramifications of this and what you enable and what you don't enable. And because I think, when I read James, and teachers and leaders of the church are going to stand before God and we're going to be judged a little different, I think those are things we got to wrestle with theologically and so forth. So I early on, I think we had a lot of conversations. What's interesting now is there's a little bit of a broadening of what's possible in this new phase of our history, I feel like people are like, oh, wow. But there is a little bit of, I forget the principle, but Malcolm Gladwell talks about, I think in one of his books, he and I totally related. I think this is what I feel at times with digital is he talks about the ideas like, I think it was either Australia or New Zealand. And I'm going to offend both of them right now, because I'm going to assume that they're the same right now, but they voted it. I know.
It was Canada. You're going to get it all wrong.
It was probably Canada. You correct me. Anyway, he had this principle that they elected their first female prime minister, and the thought was there was going to be progress for women because of that. And what happened was it actually enabled the opposite, because they said, oh, I voted for a woman prime minister, I'm not sexist. And the thought was it actually enabled more sexism. Because they thought I did it this way, and therefore, and I think sometimes what happened with COVID, this kind of happened where, we did the digital thing and they didn't have another thought about it afterwards.
Right.
And that's what I feel is like I'm kind of like, not to be like a, Southern California hippie, because I'm not, but like, I want to think holistically about your digital strategy, and I don't want it to stop and end at your, streaming and, for the sake of our conversation, tithing. Right. Usually those are the two areas churches like blindly embrace. Right. And it does not bleed over into any other area.
Anything else. Yeah.
And that's our thing now is like, so I see the change where they more accept it theologically, and they kind of know a little bit what they like, but they haven't broadened. Like there hasn't been like a third wave of it. And that's what I see is missing is don't hire an online pastor just to host a service.
Right.
Like, please. Like maybe that's one of many things you should do. But like especially smaller churches, like you don't have the budget to do that. But like it's usually just like, think about your social strategy a little bit more, think about your website and your CRM and think, all these other stuff. So I think that's what I've noticed where we're at. And I'm hoping it will get, I think the younger the leadership of the church, the younger group kind of gets into leadership. I think most people, like I'm 35, I feel like most people, low 40s, into the 30s, kind of have a better thinking of this.
Right.
But it's still I think needs some more evolution, to kick it to the next level.
Yeah. Like everyone was forced. There's this big wave that happened. It's going to settle, right? Like it's kind of settling. People are probably doing way more today than they were doing in 2019.
Yeah.
But most churches are still probably in that zone, a little bit older, smaller, and it's not in their DNA, right? Like
yes.
It's like the day it starts becoming part of church's DNA, at the beginning, or because of a leadership change or something like that, is the day when it starts maybe evolving to the next phase. Like it's evolved a lot, I'm sure, like 10 years, ago versus today, massive progress, like with a lot of things in tech, but still in its infancy, like, I mean, even I think, right, seeing like Life Church, I'm sure other people did it, like church in the metaverse.
Yep.
Like most churches aren't going there yet, but
no,
it's being dabbled in, right? And it'll progress, and we'll see what happens there. And there'll be all kinds of people that think it's crazy.
It's just the principle of, I think, and as somebody who, went to seminary, and I understand these conversations, and I know why people think this way, but I think most pastors are trained to get people in a room and to get them to do something. Yeah. And I would go, it's the model, and the room is great. And I would say the room is always going to be important, but I think there are things that digital and technology can do better than just get people in a room. And I think just think bigger.
Yeah. And even that, it's funny. I was interviewing a buddy a week or two ago, and their big thing is like using digital to get people in the room.
Mm-hmm.
And like, even that, it's like digital is valuable in many forms, right? Like there's all kinds of ways that digital, like your digital ministry and your digital outreach and digital community and all that, like there's lots of parts of it. And that's kind of the struggle, is it is multifaceted. There's lots of pieces, and churches just aren't equipped to live in that world yet. It's just, most of them, again, a little bit older, smaller, don't have the resources, don't have the team. And as the church goes through like this, evolution in like leadership turnover, it just happens, like generational things happen, and new people come in, and God will have new folks who have those skill sets using it better over time, kind of thing, with churches like Saddleback and others kind of leading the way for most other small churches to look at and go, I see what they're doing.
The metaverse conversation is a great example of like churches are doing things on the front edge, and Life Church is one of those that is always taking big swings, like the metaverse is a great, people aren't really talking about it because it isn't as sexy, but like they put all this money into their AltSpace VR deal, and Microsoft shut it down.
Right.
But to their end, they don't see this as a loss. They're learning every step of the way of, I love the example of, and I think people get so wrapped up in like, you have to know every step. Like your digital strategy is very foggy. It's probably like building a company or running a company where you kind of know at the core what your flywheel is or what you're doing. But sometimes there are like areas of fog where you just got to take one step at a time. And I think
most of the time, right? Like you don't ever have the roadmap for 10 years.
That's fair. And, but it's
like little by little,
and there are things that I could talk a lot about, but then there are areas that I see like in my own church, like I'm like, okay, I think this is where we got to go. But it's, what happens is sometimes you take small steps or even big steps, and those steps might not work, but you'll learn. One of my favorite examples about this is they talk about the story of ESPN trying to create a phone, and it totally failed. Like nobody got this ESPN phone. But what they say, they spent all this money, and you can say they lost, I forget what it was, like millions upon, it was probably, $50 million or something crazy that they lost. But they used that whole learning infrastructure to build out their mobile site that then they destroyed everybody at. They were one of the only mobile sites that actually worked. And so like they took one step towards this phone idea, totally failed. And then they used that whole learning. And I found with digital, because we've done a lot of experimenting in digital, as we move into other conversations, we have some muscles that are strong, and we have some insight of where to go and not to go. And it's like walking into a labyrinth, and you're just like, I'm just trying to avoid David Bowie, you're just like, where am I going to go? And I feel like churches, like, they don't want to make any step unless it's crystal clear. And that's because we're people of dogma and creeds, and we have a lot of clarity for the most part. But I think it's like, sometimes you just got to take small steps. And even if it's the wrong step, you'll learn something.
Right. Don't quit.
Yeah.
Okay. Small churches, right? Or, I think your average church in the US is 100 members, 150 members, like somewhere in there. There's 300,000+ churches, 70, 80% of them are that size, right? They're the 100, 150 member church. So like most churches are just small, and there's like, maybe there's a full-time pastor or a bivocational pastor. Maybe there's a couple, right? It's just, so I would love to know, again, you've seen this evolution over 10 years, and you working it now. I'm sure you get lots of people asking you questions, right? How do you do this well at a small church? So like, how can a small church, let's take a 300 member church, they stream their service on Facebook, and that's kind of, maybe they do a little teeny bit of social media. Like, how would you help them?
Yeah. I will say, to be honest, I'm so out of that grind that it's so different for me to even consider. I'm such I understand how different my world is. Right. But I would normally, anytime I talk to friends or I have these types of conversations, I usually lean heavy into, you don't need to really stream your service. I don't think that that's probably worth what it is. I might capture the audio and create a podcast that's usually what I tell friends planting churches. Just capture stuff for audio. Keep away for, because the value of that stream, is to keep people in the loop, because people are coming less frequently. And I do think that there is something around having that deliverable. It doesn't necessarily need to be the whole service. It could just be the audio, but a podcast is a great place to start. Now, if you have a stream, that's great. I usually tell people to lean heavy into YouTube. I would over anything. You don't need to have a big streaming contract. You can, you could focus on YouTube streaming. It's live. You can set this up with it, OBS, pretty simple if you want to go into that, but it's usually lean into podcast, audio only. And then two things I would leverage into the pastor, and maybe a pastor into the church's page, is to do one thing like Instagram, where you just have one type of experience where you're doing vertical video kind of moments where I just want to get to know. And then it's like email strategy. I would just create an email list that you're sending. And then you get into like the CRMs, the giving platforms. And I think those are like the core stuff that most churches, podcasts, YouTube, maybe one social account, lean towards what your primary audience is, have an email list that you're sending weekly things to, and then like maybe invest in some kind of simple CRM type, giving type of thing.
A basic, you need something, get out of Excel, you don't need anything complicated if you're small, 100 members. But I think if you get to maybe that 250, 300, you start to like, okay, you should really have, some sort of church management thing and obviously your website and some sort of way to give.
Yeah. And even like the website, like a website's great, but I would even say you can buy a URL and forward it to an Instagram account if you really were small enough.
True.
You know what I mean?
Like if you're
I mean, that gets real like lean. And here's the deal. It's knowing who you're talking to and knowing what they're using. And the biggest thing that digital does well is keep people in the loop.
Right.
And, I love those creative solutions. I definitely have my preferences of how I use things, and I definitely would build those out. But I think, like, for example, it's not, you wouldn't be shocked by this because you're running a company, but just Google HubSpot and check out email stats. Like email is killer. And I think I usually am still an old school, like, dude, you need to be doing a weekly email. You just and I always go back to this myself. Like when I came to faith, I remember I did not know what was going to happen at my church unless I was there the previous Sunday.
Right. Announcements. If you didn't hear the announcements, you didn't know what was going on.
And so to think about how much that's changed from social to email over the last, I accepted Christ when I was in 2000. So since 2000, how much that has changed. And I tell pastors, like, if you just wrote a weekly email on Thursday, I'm telling you, it would do a world of difference. And then you leverage some of these social things. And then I would always tell any church of any size, can you just cast some vision around digital? Because I bet you got some people doing some cool stuff. You as a pastor don't have to do this.
Like in the church, in the church, try to round up a handful of people that are kind of interested.
Just be like, hey guys, like this is out of COVID. I would be like, hey guys, like we learned a lot about digital and streaming, all this. Like if you run like a marketing thing for your company, if you do something like, if you got like more than 1,000 Instagram or TikTok followers, can you help our church out? Like just create a place where people can serve. I remember when I first started at Saddleback in 09, we didn't have a Facebook page or Twitter account or anything. Yeah. And we were kind of slow to the game as a big church for sure. And I got told to start a social media ministry, which is funny to think that's what we would call it then. But I remember we did like a volunteer thing. We did this, and there's a guy who walked in. His name's Jeff, amazing guy, and he ran social media for like, and this will be more controversial than it probably needs to be, but he ran it for the whole Republican Party. And I remember he was just
like, I don't care what it is. Like, that's I know. Big.
I mean, if Jeff's listening to this, that's not a shot at you, Jeff. Like legitimately, people get triggered now. So I have no idea how people feel on these things. But
we love you, Jeff. It's fine.
But Jeff, it was amazing. I remember just talking to Jeff and listening. I was like, okay, he's smarter than me. How do I just get him to do this? And he helped us. He helped Saddleback. He wasn't a staff person. He was a volunteer. He just he had ran like call campaigns and set up, huge infrastructures and CRMs for a long time. We were like, how do we just have him like execute this? And so like if a church like our size uses our volunteers for this, you can too. And I know it's going to be a little risky, but there's probably some 14-year-old girl that's just killing it on TikTok at your church. And like, what if you just gave them a little vision? I bet they can figure. I'm not saying you got to be on TikTok, but like there are people doing
like just as an example, like something, right? There's people. Yes. I love that. Every church can do that, and then do the, I don't know, the monthly dinner, round them up.
Yep, like, get everybody together, encourage. I mean, you as the pastor or you as the leader, you're keeping people on the right path. You're encouraging them. You're knowing their name. You're knowing their birthdays. I mean, I can't like. People will sometimes come to me and think like, oh, Jay, you're the expert of online or whatever. And I'm like, the expert online? You know how like...
Well, you're the first. You may not be the expert, but you're the first.
I was the first. You're repeating. I like this. This is how this thing. But like I constantly, and I bet you feel this way too, but like I watch, like I have a 12, my oldest is 12. And I watch the way my kids use the internet, which they wouldn't call it that. But it's like, it's so different than me. And even the words they use and the way they watch YouTube, I'm not going to pretend like I know what they know, but I can lean, if I know my church's vision and strategy, like this is what we're trying to do. This is our methodology of come and see, come and die. Then I could take somebody who's an expert in their field and I can go, hey, this is what we're doing. What do you think? And I think that's what a pastor should be doing. We should be administrating the part and really empowering, if we really believe in the priesthood of all believers, you know what I mean? And there are digital people in your church. They may not think they're experts. Some of them probably do think they're experts, but lean in on them. And we've benefited greatly from that.
Yeah. That might be that's the starting point, right? If you're not doing much, or if you're doing a little bit, but you want to do more, like, man, put the word out in the church and start preaching the vision of wanting to kind of build that up. And just see who people probably come out of the woodwork. When it's an interesting question too, right? Like I've been around, I know a bit about the online world, but I'm also really busy. I'm in this like prime light, right? I got kids, school, sports, church, company, all the things. So I want to help my church, right? So I'm asking this from like a leadership perspective. When you have people who like have some talent, have some ability, but their time is tough to come by. How do you, right? Like actually doing the job is the harder part, right? Coming in and being part of a team that like, comes up with strategy or does some consulting or whatever, right? Like jumps in, but like doing it sort of day to day becomes challenging, right? And sometimes you get the volunteer who can do it and they get it and they can't sustain it because it's just not possible. Like, how do you help that? Like, how would you help pastors, you know, leverage those talents, but also, you know, have it be feasible for those people?
Yeah. I mean, there's a larger thing here that I think most corporations or companies are wrestling through. Is like, this is like the remote work thing where it works well if you trust the person and the person understands your culture. And if they don't know that, there's this gap. And I think most pastors, I think the encouragement is to figure out the rhythm to make them feel included, because somebody will do something one time or two times, but they keep coming because that's rewarding, but they're ultimately coming to be known and heard. So if you don't check in with them, for example, like if you say, oh, can you just run the social media thing? Right. And then you talk to them one time and you never talk to them again, you know, they're going to stop at one point. And I think this is where I think we've learned a lot around having a communal experience that's decentralized is really valuable. Having a WhatsApp group or having a text thread or having a, you know, up to this point, it has been Facebook groups, but those rhythms have been changing. But I had an aha moment around this where our house church kind of strategy that we call extensions, somebody hosting church in their home or renting space, if they're doing it far enough away and they do it for a month and they kind of plateau, they can feel very discouraged that it's not growing. But if I connect them to a bunch of other leaders and we have a space where all the leaders are together, they will continue on because they know they're not alone. I mean, this is why church planting has networks so that they don't get smothered, you know, with the discouragement, because you just need to know. It's probably the same feeling as like if you're talking to another company doing something, you're like, oh yeah, like this is hard, or like, wow, this sucks. And I think what I found with having volunteers serve in a digital way, it can be more decentralized. And so I think it's more important than ever to have monthly Zooms where you guys all get together and somehow connect everybody either in a group or a Zoom and just have rhythms where you hang out. And I think like, I always think of it like I got excited about ministry and I really wanted to become a pastor because I volunteered in our high school ministry and I looked forward to our monthly meetings with all the other high school volunteers. And I showed up because my pastor knew my name, he cared for me, and we all hung out. And I think sometimes people think because it can be decentralized, you don't need all that, but that stuff is so important. And so a lot of times people why don't I have more volunteers? Why is nobody sticking around? It's because you don't have anybody developing those people and loving on those people. And just because you can't have coffee, like I'm constantly struggling with most of my volunteers are in different places and I've never met them.
Right. Yeah.
But they feel deeply engaged with me because I message, call, and we get all together. And so you need to have like small gap. I think that's probably one of the biggest things is just connect them to other people that are also doing this digital thing and almost treat it like a team of 5 and you guys are all doing and it's like having a text message thread where you just get that encouragement. And trust me, those small communal touches, I think, breathe a lot of life into that person who's doing that thing by themselves. Yeah. And that's been our success, I would say, at least part of it.
Yeah. I love that. Well, man, this has been awesome. I know we're probably close to the hour. You're a pro. This is cool. Where can folks go? Like, do you have resources? I know you have a website. So tell us your website, but also like, where can if a church leader wants to go and just study this more, learn more, do you have any good places that you think they should go check out?
It would be great if I didn't have a website. Like I talk about all this and like, it would be like, you know, it's like an AOL builder website back in the day. You remember those?
Yes. GeoCities.
Yes. It's actually, find me on Zondervan the City. That'd be great. Oh, you know, it'd be funny. Some of these jokes will never make sense. Like after a period of time, that one probably doesn't make sense.
Like my kids won't get it. No, like, cause like mine are 11. So yeah, YouTube, like that. YouTube is everything. It's fascinating. Like
I know YouTube is everything to them.
Everything.
I had to tell them to get off my premium account. I'm not like they kept watching ads, and my YouTube algorithm was just so jacked up. I'm like, no, you guys have to watch ads. I earned the right to not watch ads.
Yes.
So you have to deal with, like, we went, this is totally rabbit trail, but we did a road trip during last summer, and we were in some hotel, and my favorite part was my kids in a hotel room going, why can't I skip the ads like on the TV? And right. I was like, I'm going to slap you. Like, so I don't believe in physical abuse, but my dad would have hit you.
Yeah.
No, you can go to, on my website at jkranda.com. I have a free like YouTube course, actually. So talking about YouTube, I shot that, and it's just a series of conversations. And yeah, I care deeply about this. I have the free YouTube course, and then there's a couple other like ebooks there that are free that you can download.
There you go. It's all there.
Yeah, it's all there. It's all free.
jkranda.com. Kranda.
Yep.
Just so everyone got it.
And follow me on Instagram, I guess. I don't know. That's
on
all
Insta? Yeah, just
you can DM me if you got a question.
J Kranda. Is that your Instagram handle?
Yes, it is.
It is. Yeah, there we go. Okay, couple kind of just quick questions to wrap it up. What's a book that you've read that you just think everybody's got to read this book?
With a book that I've read that everyone's got to read this book. Oh my goodness. Oh my goodness. Oh, well, I think this is an easy one. It's not like the most tactical one around this, but I think it really sums up the way the internet works. But I would tell everybody to read Tribes by Seth Godin.
Yeah,
I think
skills.
It's everybody knows it in our space, but I think people I definitely would say tactically, that's probably the one that this is how you think. There's a bunch of other books, but yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. How about a podcast that you're listening to like right now? Doesn't have to be related to anything. Just one you're listening to right now that you love.
Oh man. Well, I try to be a technology enthusiast. And so I'm listening to the Dithering podcast.
Okay.
Which is Ben Thompson and John Gruber. And yeah, it's actually a paid podcast, but it's one where they break down tech trends and stuff. But Dithering is a great podcast.
Like spell it for us.
It's Dithering.
Dithering. Okay. The Dithering podcast. I love it, man. Well, Jay, this has been great, man. Thank you for your time. Thanks for educating us. It's an honor and a privilege to interview the very first ever online campus pastor. This is going to be good. I'm definitely sending it to Aussie Dave when we're done.
As you should.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And everybody else that has that in their title. But this has been great, man. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah. Thanks everybody for watching. We'll catch you guys next week on another episode of Modern Church Leader. Bye-bye.